And I'll do the best I can, and I'll probably just have to forget the notes and just try to do the best I can. I think we should realize that we should distinguish, it will take years and years and years. We're never going to duplicate the body images and blood marks, I don't think. We might reach more common ground as to what caused the images or the blood marks. But we can do something that's far more important than this. We've talked a lot about neutrons, and I think they have so much potential. If you tested the shroud at the atomic level, I want to show you what you could find. What you could do is, you may not duplicate the image or tell exactly how the process was, but you could prove a miraculous event occurred. And when I say miraculous event, I'm giving the layman's definition, an event that doesn't occur naturally and that humans can't perform. This is a layman's definition, but you could prove that a miraculous event occurred in which radiation, including neutrons, emanated from the length and width and depth crucified body in the cloth. And that's the main thing. And I'm going to try to show you how you could get such astounding evidence. As you know, this radiating event would not only create carbon-14 atoms, but two other radioactive atoms who have extremely long half-lives. That's chlorine-36 and calcium-41. And they're such a great candidate. 99% of the radioactive calcium and chlorine atoms that may have gotten encoded into the shroud 2,000 years ago would still be there today. And where would they be? If they came from the body, they would be on those little diamonds in the corner of the cloth. Those are the parts of the cloth that's farthest away from the body, and the part of the body that's closest to them is the thin feet. The next smallest or least amount of these radioactive atoms would be in the corners of the cloth as they went closer to the thin feet. Okay, they start increasing as they go up the long side of the cloth toward the bulkier parts of the body. And then they're going to increase even more as you go horizontally toward the body from the ends of the cloth. How much they're going to increase once they get on the body. I took these figures from Bob's MCNP codes, and this just talks about one of the radioactive atoms, carbon-14, and this is what a conventional radiocarbon dating gets you. Starting around the shins of the man's shins and calves, you've already got dates into the future, and they go higher as you go to the bulkier parts of the body. As you go up the leg and you get to the hips and the stomach and the chest, they increase all the more. They increase even more on the back side because the neutrons are going to bounce and ricochet or rebound. The scientists use a different term, back onto the cloth, and you're going to get more on the dorsal side because it's laying on the hard limestone bench or floor. And on the body image, on the dorsal side, on the bulkiest part of the body, you're going to get I think 8,000 AD, which is 5,000 years into the future, or 6,000, something like that, into the future. Since the blood has more chemical elements than linen, if you dated some blood marks, it has 100 times more nitrogen than linen. You would get a conventional radiocarbon date 50 or 100,000 years into the future, and I'm being conservative with that calculation. Because these radioactive atoms can only be created by neutron radiation or a stream of neutrons, neutron particles, because they occur at known rates, are created at known rates, and disappear at known rates, and because scientists would have measured the organic amounts of calcium and chlorine and nitrogen at every location or at any strategic sample, and if you found the first two, the chlorine 36 or the calcium 41, you would not only know that it was irradiated with neutrons, but you'd know how many of these radioactive atoms was created. It would tell you the amount of neutrons that every part received. That will allow scientists to calculate not only the real age of the cloth, but when that event occurred. And you could even do this with the limestone. If Jesus' tomb is extant and you found these radioactive atoms in a limestone tomb, then you'd know where the event occurred. You could conceivably know that a miraculous event occurred, and not just with radiation emanating from a body, but neutrons. And forget to get neutrons to emanate from the length and width and depth of a body. You have to break the nuclear force, the strong nuclear force. It's the strongest force in all of science. You'd have a miracle on several respects. You could prove such an event occurred and that the source was the length and width and depth of the body, and all you had to do was take a dot of blood or maybe a postage stamp size sample from the linen or the charred material, and there's 42 vials of charred material. And if you have the original limestone walls of Jesus' tomb, you don't even need you need a thimbleful. So at minimally invasive or non-destructive techniques, you could, if you took several samples from different on-image and off-image locations and blood or linen or charred material, a couple with billions of items of these radioactive atoms in these samples, you could prove a miraculous event occurred from the length and width and depth of the body. If it occurs in the first century in Jesus' reputed burial tomb, and it's a miraculous event, this is far more specific evidence than anything we've ever had in history or any DNA evidence. How many miracles have you been able to prove? And what else would you have? You would have this event that's consistent with the resurrection and having occurred to a human body, that's all the medical and all the other evidence, which is also largely unfakeable, would indicate this happened to a man who was scourged with Roman instruments. He was crowned over his head. He was mocked. He was stabbed with a Roman spear. He had all the same events that happened to Jesus, pre-mortem and post-mortem, in the same sequence. What does a series of events add up to? Well, the most attested sources in all of history, and now these sources would be corroborated by science, says, well, what do you get? The passion crucifixion, death, burial, and resurrection. That is the formula. Get life after death, even though we're certainly not going to get it by evolution. We're certainly not going to figure out a way to get it for us, and we certainly don't deserve it. But yet we get that. So you might have not only objective and independent evidence regarding the central premises of one religion, and as far as I know, no other religion or philosophy, including agnosticism or atheism, has any such evidence. You'd have evidence for a path to life after death. And extensive, objective, independent, and unfakeable evidence. And when I say extensive, look at the evidence now you have for the body image. You have thousands, probably tens of thousands of individually, superficially, uniformly body image fibers that give a three-dimensional relief and a vertically collimated direction and high resolution and on and on and on. You got tens of thousands of that. You'd have hundreds of body images or blood marks that are unique in several respects. If you examine the shroud at the molecular level, which is what I call for, along with more DNA testing, if that's available, you'd have millions of items from, that's an understatement, at the molecular level. It would take years for scientists to absorb this evidence, and you could acquire it by non-destructively examining the shroud over a period of 6 hours on both sides of the cloth. If you had the atomic evidence, you'd have just in these little billions of unfakeable items of evidence for all these events. This is something that a human being would be entitled to know. This is important. You might get life after death. And for scientists not to want to go forth and do these tests, the payoff is so large for humanity. We're not just talking about the billions of people who are alive today. How about all the billions of people who are going to live in the future? And sometimes I understand science and I respect it and everything like that, but they think like if you don't have 100% evidence of these events, and let's face it, you can't duplicate a resurrection, so you're not going to have that, but you've got billions. Well, when they focus on 100% proof, they're missing the equation entirely. The 100% factor that you're missing is in the problem. The problem is, I'm 100% sure that every one of us in this room is going to die. That's where you focus your 100% thinking. Since we're all going to die, and let's face it, why not have life after death? Or that most of us would like to get this, then why don't we try to acquire objective and independent evidence that could give us a better indication of how to acquire that? So there's no excuse not to pursue evidence along these lines. And these radioactive evidence items would be so unfakeable and so people would understand this. The lay public would realize, wow, this is really extensive, especially when you compared it to other philosophies or religions which have no objective or independent evidence, let alone billions of unfakeable items. So we have to go forward. It's not a question of, is this a scientific proof or something? If you're a part of humanity, and all of humanity could be affected by this, this could be a great frontier that humanity has never approached. You could collectively look at the evidence for a path to life after death. And you could settle a lot of disputes going on in which religion is an underlying element or a cause of many wars and conflicts that precede the time of Jesus. We've never had evidence relating to the central premises of any religion or a route to life after death. We should gladly pursue this and work together, of course. So that's where we should go into the future, where we should go from here. We're off to a great start, but I think science dropped the ball way back in 1902 when Vignon and I'm terrible with names. When Vignon and Deleuze present all this evidence to the French Academy of Science, and he agreed, yeah, you could never paint that. And 15 minutes later, they meet and talk it over, and they say, well, since we never got into King Victor Emmanuel, the owner at the time, let's just forget it. Well, let's pursue this. And this is to say nothing of the fact that the Vatican owns the cloth, and I can't help but think if Pope Francis knew all this, he'd say, what do we got to lose? We got everything to gain and such little to lose. Our faith is not based on the Shroud of Turin, but our faith is based on real evidence that occurred from Jesus coming to earth and doing all these things in front of crowds and witnesses. His death was witnessed by everyone. He came back. They all saw him after he died. They put their fingers in his hands. Everyone saw the scourging. This is done over the high holiday. Miracles were seen. We have a lot of evidence to base the original Christians to base their faith on. This would give us more evidence. Everything that we decide in life, we base it on evidence. Faith is wonderful, but it's not just purely abstract. It's based on the example that Christ did. And if this is Christ's burial tomb, and if radiation, especially particle radiation from the body, this would be his body and blood on the cloth that left by Christ. You have to pursue this, no matter what your religion or if you're an agnostic or atheist. So that's where we should go from here. I can't think of a better, more positive, more hopeful direction. It may be the most exciting trip that humanity's ever taken, and we'd have objective independence to guide the way. And if somebody else came up with more evidence for a different philosophy, fine. But right now, it's already pretty lopsided. Right now, I feel like it's 1,000 or 10,000 to 1. You could literally make it, I hate to keep repeating myself, but you could make it 1 billion to nothing. You know, this evidence would easily wipe out the one problem result, and that's the carbon-14 test result. It would easily just obliterate it. And you're talking about pretty much a unanimous opinion of the evidence on the Shroud and of the objective and independent evidence for any other philosophy or religion. It's time to go home. Oh, yes.